The internet said Caitlyn Clark was done with the Indiana fever. They said she was packing her bags, heading to New York, walking away from everything she built in Indiana. One clip, one timeout, one sideline exchange, and suddenly the whole basketball world was convinced the fever were falling apart from the inside. Skip Bayless went on social media and told millions of people that Stephanie White had been fired. Fans flooded every comment section demanding the coaching staff be removed. Trade rumors started flying around like confetti, and through all of it, one important detail kept getting buried beneath the noise. None of it was true, not a single word. What's actually happening inside the Indiana fever right now is the complete opposite of what the clickbait machine wants you to believe. And by the time you hear the full picture, you're going to understand why Caitlyn Clark isn't running away from Indiana. She's running towards something historic. Stay with us, because this story goes a lot deeper than a viral clip. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop your take in the comments. Let's get into it. It was May 30th, 2026. The Indiana Fever were on the road facing the Portland Fire, and the game was ugly from the opening tip. Portland controlled the pace, Indiana's defense looked sluggish, and nothing was clicking offensively. By the time the final buzzer sounded, the Fever had been blown out 100-84. It was a frustrating loss that dropped their record to 4-4 in a season that was supposed to be their breakout campaign. But nobody was talking about the final score. Nobody cared about the box score, the turnovers, or the defensive breakdowns. All anyone cared about was what happened during a timeout in the second half. Cameras caught Stephanie White in the middle of an intense coaching moment. She was animated, leaning forward, jabbing her finger in the air, clearly making a strong point to the team. And sitting right in front of her was Caitlyn Clark. The two appeared to be in a heated back and forth. Clark threw her hands up at one point, visibly frustrated. She shook her head. Moments later, White subbed rookie Raven Johnson into the game in Clark's place. The clip was barely 30 seconds long, but within hours, it had been viewed millions of times. And that's when everything spiraled. Social media did what social media does best. It took a 30-second clip with zero audio, zero context, and zero inside information and turned it into the biggest controversy in the Wnba. Fans were calling for Stephanie White to be fired immediately. Sports commentators who hadn't watched a single Fever game all season were suddenly experts on the team's internal dynamics. And then came the moment that pushed everything over the edge. Skip Bayless, the longtime sports talking head, posted on social media that the Indiana Fever had fired Stephanie White. It was completely, entirely, 100% false. The Fever hadn't fired anyone. White was still the head coach. She was at practice the next day. But by the time the truth caught up to the lie, the narrative had already spread across every corner of the internet. People were writing articles, content creators were making videos with thumbnails showing Clark in a Liberty jersey. The manufactured drama had taken on a life of its own. And that's the part that so many people missed. This wasn't a story about basketball. It was a story about how fast misinformation spreads when the most talked about athlete in women's basketball is involved. Every facial expression, every gesture, every interaction Caitlyn Clark has gets dissected under a microscope that no other player in the league has ever experienced. A coach challenging a player during a timeout is something that happens in every single basketball game ever played. It happens in the NBA, it happens in college, it happens in high school gyms across the country. Two competitive people who desperately want to win going at it in the heat of a bad loss. That's basketball. But when the player is Caitlyn Clark, it becomes a 5-alarm fire. What happened next, though, is what really matters, and it's the part that most of the viral clips conveniently left out. 2 days after the Portland loss, Caitlyn Clark stood in front of reporters at the Fever's practice facility, and she didn't hold back. She didn't dodge the question, she didn't give a corporate non-answer. She looked directly into the cameras and set the record straight in a way that left absolutely no room for misinterpretation.
First of all, two people being competitive. Two people that really want to win, Clark said. I think a lot of those things happen all the time, and I know there's a camera on me, and that's how it's going to be. But there's a lot of people out there in the media or on TV that they think they know a lot of things, and they're just blatantly wrong about a lot of things. She wasn't done. When asked specifically about her relationship with White, Clark's answer was as personal as it was powerful. "When I got hurt at the Connecticut game last year, I bawled in Steph's arms. That's somebody I will ride for the rest of my life." Those are the moments that people don't see. People that just sit on their phones all day, they don't see those moments. They don't see the moments we come into work. They don't see the moments that really suck, that people have your back. And then she said 6 words that shut the entire narrative down. "I ride for Steph, period." Stephanie White addressed it too, and her response was just as direct. She pointed out something that everyone already knows but rarely wants to admit. "I think what happened in that moment is I was challenging a player. It's coaching," White said. "I don't often think it becomes an issue if you're watching it in men's sports most of the time. My relationship with Caitlyn is great. I love Caitlyn. I ride with her." That last part is the real conversation nobody wanted to have. When an NBA coach gets in the face of a player during a timeout, it's called passion. It's called intensity. It's called great coaching. When Pop screams at Tim Duncan, it's legendary. When Phil Jackson challenged Kobe, it was the foundation of a dynasty. But when Stephanie White challenges Caitlyn Clark in the exact same way, suddenly it's dysfunction. Suddenly it's a toxic environment. Suddenly she needs to be fired. The double standard was glaring, and both Clark and White weren't afraid to point it out. A few weeks later, Clark sat down with ESPN's Malika Andrews and went even deeper. "I'm easy to coach," and Steph would say the same thing. "And I think at times may be difficult too, because I don't think there's many people that get guarded the way I do. So I think you have to get creative scheme-wise, and I don't think there's a better person to do that than Coach Steph." Then she said something that revealed the real nature of their relationship. "I love Coach Steph. And I think what I love about her the most is that her competitive fire is the same exact as mine. We'll go at it, but at the end of the day, we love each other so much. That's what makes it fun, and there's nobody else you want to go to war with if they're not going to be like that." This wasn't a player tolerating a coach. This wasn't someone being diplomatic for the cameras. This was genuine admiration between two people who share the same relentless drive to win. And the proof wasn't just in the words. It showed up later in the season, too. After a game where Fever fans actually booed Stephanie White inside their own arena, Clark was furious. Not at the refs, not at the opposing team, at her own fans. "I talked to Steph earlier in the day, and I think we forget a lot of times that we're human, and she has feelings. There's moments that are really hard. There was no way we were losing this game for her." The Fever went out and dominated that night. That tells you everything you need to know about the dynamic inside that locker room. But the real question is, how did Clark get to this point? Because less than a year ago, nobody even knew if she'd be able to play basketball again. To understand what the 2026 season means for Caitlyn Clark, you have to understand what the 2025 season took from her, because it took almost everything. Clark entered her sophomore WNBA campaign with the kind of momentum that few athletes ever experience. She had just won Rookie of the Year. She made the All-WNBA first team as a first-year player. She led the league in assists. She was the AP Female Athlete of the Year. The Indiana Fever had made the playoffs for the first time in 2016, largely because of what she brought to the franchise. Everything was pointing to 2025 being the year she took it to another level.
Then her body betrayed her. It started with quad tightness during the preseason. She played through it, started the regular season, and then 4 games in, she suffered a quad strain that sidelined her for 3 weeks. She came back, played 5 games, and then went down again with a left groin strain that kept her out for more than 2 weeks. She returned once more on July 9th against the Golden State Valkyries, played 3 games, and then in the final minute of a win against the Connecticut Sun on July 15th, she injured her right groin. That was it. She never played another game that season. 13 games. That's all Clark managed in her entire sophomore year. 13 games out of a 44-game season. She watched from the sidelines as her teammates fought through the rest of the regular season without her. She cheered from the bench in street clothes as the Fever somehow clawed their way to the WNBA semifinals, where they pushed the Las Vegas Aces to a decisive Game 5 before finally falling short. Think about that for a second. Clark watched her team nearly reach the WNBA Finals without her, and she couldn't do a single thing to help them on the court. For someone with her competitive fire, that had to be agonizing. She smiled through it, she supported her teammates every step of the way, but behind the scenes, the frustration was eating at her. She acknowledged it publicly, too. "I think a lot of people sometimes think I'm a robot. I'm not a robot. I have emotions, I have feelings," Clark said during the season, "and it can be really difficult to go through a lot of that. I'm 24 years old trying to navigate a lot, and I think at times it probably affects me a little bit more than I put on." When the season ended, Clark posted a message on Instagram that said everything she couldn't say out loud. 2025, you were a year. 2026, I welcome you with open arms. Let's get it. That was the sound of someone who had been through the fire and was ready to come out the other side swinging. The Fever organization felt the same way. They brought in new pieces around Clark and Aaliyah Boston. They signed Monique Billings, Misha Hines-Allen, Shatori Walker-Kimbrough. They drafted Raven Johnson with their first-round pick. They added depth and they added toughness. But the biggest question hanging over everything was the simplest one. Would Caitlyn Clark be healthy? The answer came during the FIBA World Cup qualifying tournament in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where Clark played her first meaningful basketball in 8 months. Fever general manager Amber Cox raced to Puerto Rico to see it with her own eyes, and what she saw was the Caitlyn Clark everyone remembered. Within the first few minutes, Clark had 2 assists and had drained a deep 3 that brought the crowd to its feet. She was back. She was moving freely, and she looked hungrier than ever. But nobody could have predicted just how hungry. The 2026 season has not been a comeback story for Caitlyn Clark. Comeback stories imply that the player returns to where they were before. Clark didn't come back to where she was. She went somewhere else entirely, somewhere no WNBA player has ever been. Through 37 games this season, Clark is averaging 21.7 points and 8.3 assists per game on 44.4% shooting and 35.4% from 3. Those numbers alone would make her one of the best players in the league, but the numbers don't tell the full story. What happened on July 18th in Indianapolis does. The Seattle Storm came into Gainbridge Fieldhouse expecting a competitive game. What they got instead was a Caitlyn Clark performance that will be talked about for decades. Clark dropped 45 points. She dished out 10 assists. She became the first player in WNBA history to record a 40-10 game. Let that settle in for a moment. In the entire history of the WNBA, every season, every player, every game that has ever been played, nobody had ever done what Clark did that night. Not Diana Taurasi, not Sue Bird, not Asia Wilson. Nobody. After the game, the Fever's locker room video told you everything. Stephanie White stood in front of the team and just said, "See? My God! My God!" Then she rattled off the records one by one. Most points in a single game in Fever franchise history. First 40-10 game in league history. Clark and Kelsey Mitchell combined for 75 points, the most by any 2 Fever players in a single game ever. The locker room erupted. Teammates were laughing and cheering, and Clark, standing in the middle of it, was smiling the way she always does, like this was exactly what she expected to happen.
That performance wasn't an outlier either. Clark has been this good all season. She's the engine that makes everything around her work. When she pushes the ball in transition, the entire defense has to shift. When she pulls up from the logo, the arena holds its breath. When she threads a pass through traffic to Aaliyah Boston rolling to the rim, it looks like something out of a video game. The Fever are 24-13. They've clinched a playoff spot for the 3rd straight season. They've won 10 of their last 12 games at one point during a dominant July stretch. And right now, they're not just a good team, they're a legitimate championship contender. The MVP conversation is real too. Clark's numbers put her in the top tier of every major statistical category, and her impact goes far beyond what the stat sheet shows. She sells out every arena she plays in.
Television ratings spike whenever she's on screen. She is, by every measurable standard, the most impactful player in the history of the WNBA. And somehow, she's only 24 years old. But what's happening off the court might be just as significant as what's happening on it. On June 17, 2026, the wait that had been building for 2 years finally ended. Nike officially unveiled the Caitlyn 1, Clark's first signature basketball shoe, and it was everything fans had been hoping for and more. Clark had been dropping hints for months. She changed her Instagram name and profile picture to tease the shoe. She wore an all-blue outfit to a game with a bracelet that read 10/01/26, hinting at the release date. She told Travis and Jason Kelce on the Night Heights podcast that the technology we're putting into my shoe isn't anything Nike has ever put into a basketball shoe before, and she wasn't exaggerating. The Caitlyn 1 features Nike Opticast, a brand new construction technology that uses cast polyurethane nodes to reduce drag and enhance movement on the court. The visual design is inspired by the ripple of the three-point arc, fitting for a player who has made the deep ball her trademark. The midsole uses Cushlon foam paired with an Air Zoom turbo unit that sits closer to the foot, delivering faster response and better court feel. And the details are personal. Double swooshes reference her initials. Molded 22s and CCs appear throughout the upper. The underfoot messaging includes phrases like "shoot more threes" from anywhere, and "it was never a long shot." At $140 for the adult version, the Caitlyn 1 is the most expensive debut signature shoe from a WNBA player. A'ja Wilson's A1 retails for $115. Sabrina Ionescu's line tops out around $135. Angel Reese's Reebok AR1 sits at $130. Nike is betting big that Clark's audience extends far beyond basketball courts, and based on the reaction so far, they're right. The shoe is set to officially launch on October 1, 2026, starting with the Racer Blue colorway. But Clark has already debuted multiple colorways on court this season, including a purple pair she teased on Instagram and a multicolored All-Star edition that had fans going crazy. She posted a picture of the All-Star pair and wrote, "I think these will be a favorite." She even hid 5 pairs of the shoes around Chicago during All-Star weekend for lucky fans to find, the first non-Clark humans to own a pair. This shoe deal is part of Clark's massive $28 million 8-year contract with Nike, the largest endorsement deal in women's basketball player in history. But what makes it bigger than just sneakers is what it represents for the sport. Clark is the 5th active WNBA player to have her own signature shoe with a major brand, and the fact that Nike is investing this kind of technology and marketing behind her tells you exactly where the sport is heading. This isn't just about selling shoes, this is about building an empire, and that empire has the Caitlyn 1 as its foundation. The competition in the signature shoe space is fiercer than ever. Wilson has the A1 with Nike, Ionescu has her Sabrina line, Reese is pushing hard with Reebok, Breanna Stewart has Puma behind her. But Clark has something none of them have: the combination of on-court dominance, cultural crossover appeal, and a fan base that will quite literally buy anything with her name on it. The shoe race is on, and right now, Clark hasn't even officially launched hers yet, and it's already the most talked about sneaker in women's sports history. But the biggest business move of Clark's career isn't a shoe. It's the decision that's going to define the next decade of Indiana Fever basketball.
On April 28, 2026, the Indiana Fever made an announcement that surprised exactly nobody. They exercised the 4th-year option on Caitlyn Clark's rookie contract, officially locking her in through the 2027 WNBA season. It was a formality. Everyone knew it was coming. But the paperwork itself opened the door to something much bigger. Here's the situation. Clark was drafted 1st overall in 2024 and signed a 4-year rookie contract worth a total of $338,056. Yes, you read that right. The most transformational player in league history was making less than $85,000 a year when she entered the WNBA. But the new collective bargaining agreement changed everything. Under the new CBA, player salaries across the league jumped dramatically,
The average increased by nearly 400%. Clark's salary for 2026 ballooned to $528,846, and her 2027 option is worth $597,596. Those numbers are still a fraction of what she's worth, and everyone knows it. Clark makes over $16 million annually from endorsements alone. Her WNBA salary is essentially a rounding error on her total income. But the contract matters because of what comes next. Because Clark made the All-WNBA first team as a rookie in 2024, she qualifies for the league's new EPIC provision, exceptional performance on initial contract. This allows her to renegotiate her fourth-year salary and sign a 3-year extension 1 year earlier than she normally could. Her teammate Aaliyah Boston already used the EPIC provision to sign a record $6.3 million extension, the largest total deal value in WNBA history. Clark is eligible to do the same after this season. And the Fever aren't going to wait around. As one report put it, given that Clark has been clear about wanting to play her entire career in Indiana, one would assume that she and her team will begin extension negotiations as soon as it makes sense for both sides. Clark herself has publicly stated her commitment to the franchise multiple times. She's not going anywhere. She doesn't want to go anywhere. Indiana is home. But that hasn't stopped the rumor mill from churning. In May, during a lighthearted moment with Aaliyah Boston, Clark playfully reminded her teammate that she's not signed to a long-term deal. Fans immediately seized on the comment, convinced it was a sign that Clark was keeping her options open. In reality, it was exactly what it looked like, two friends joking around. But in the world of Caitlyn Clark, where every word and every gesture gets analyzed like it's a classified government document, even a harmless joke becomes a headline. The truth is, the Fever have built everything around Clark and Boston as their cornerstones. The franchise has invested in surrounding them with better talent, better coaching, and better infrastructure. The new CBA means Clark will eventually be in line for a salary that matches her value. The current max is $1.4 million per year, and when Clark becomes eligible for that kind of money, she'll get it. But more importantly, she'll get it in Indiana. So then why do the trade rumors and departure narratives keep popping up? That's a question worth answering, because the reason says a lot more about the state of sports media than it does about Caitlyn Clark. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody making Caitlyn Clark leaving Indiana videos wants to admit. These stories aren't about basketball. They're about clicks. They're about engagement. They're about feeding an algorithm that rewards outrage, speculation, and manufactured drama over actual journalism. The competitor video transcript that inspired this breakdown is a perfect example. It claims Clark is getting ready to quit the Indiana Fever. It claims the New York Liberty made a covert multi-million-dollar offer. It claims the coaching staff used fictitious ailment reports to control Clark's playing time. It says the WNBA commissioner is furious and the Fever's front office has collapsed. None of this is real. Literally none of it. Clark is under contract through 2027. There is no trade offer from New York. The coaching staff didn't fabricate injury reports. Clark genuinely suffered multiple soft tissue injuries in 2025 and has been fully healthy all season in 2026. The commissioner hasn't said anything remotely resembling fury about the Fever, and the front office is functioning just fine, having built a 24-win team that's heading back to the playoffs.
But the video doesn't need to be true to be effective. It just needs to be dramatic enough to keep people watching for 15 minutes. And that's the game. The Caitlyn Clark clickbait industrial complex is one of the most prolific content machines on the internet right now. Every day, there are dozens of videos uploaded, with thumbnails showing Clark in a different team's jersey, headlines screaming about betrayal and shocking decisions and the end of Indiana. They use Clark's fame as fuel, turning her name into engagement bait for audiences who might not follow the WNBA closely enough to know the difference between speculation and reality. And Clark knows it. She's talked about it directly.
There's a lot of people out there in the media or on TV that they think they know a lot of things, and they're just blatantly wrong about a lot of things, she said during the Stephanie White situation. People that just sit on their phones all day, they don't see those moments. That quote tells you everything about the disconnect between the real Caitlyn Clark and the Caitlyn Clark that lives in YouTube thumbnails. The real one is showing up to practice every day, working on her game, defending her coach, supporting her teammates, and playing some of the best basketball anyone has ever seen. The fake one is apparently always on the verge of quitting, always unhappy, always surrounded by dysfunction. One of them is based on facts, the other is based on an algorithm, and unfortunately, the algorithm is louder. The reason this matters goes beyond just Clark. It affects how fans perceive the entire WNBA. When millions of people are constantly told that the league is full of drama, dysfunction, and players trying to escape their teams, it shapes the narrative around women's basketball in a way that undermines the incredible growth the sport has experienced. The WNBA just expanded to 2 new cities. Viewership is at all-time highs. Players are finally getting paid closer to what they deserve. Arenas are selling out, and the talent level has never been deeper. That's the real story. But it doesn't generate the same engagement as a fake trade rumor, so it gets buried. There's something else worth mentioning too. The emotional toll this takes on the people involved is real. Caitlyn has been open about how the constant scrutiny affects her. "I think a lot of people sometimes think I'm a robot. I'm not a robot," she said. She's talked about how it gets to her more than she lets on, how navigating all of it at 24 years old is genuinely hard. Stephanie White has been through the same thing. Fans booing her in her own arena, false reports about being fired, constant second-guessing from people who have never coached a game in their lives. These are real human beings dealing with manufactured controversy every single day. And Clark has consistently chosen to respond not with anger or bitterness, but with transparency and loyalty. That says something about who she is as a person, not just as a player. So let's bring this full circle. Where does Caitlyn Clark actually stand right now? Not the internet version of Caitlyn Clark, not the clickbait version, the real one. She's in the middle of the best season of her professional career. She's averaging over 21 points and 8 assists per game while shooting the ball better than she ever has. She set an all-time WNBA record with a 45-point, 10-assist performance that will live in basketball history forever. Her team is 24-13, headed to the playoffs for the 3rd consecutive year and playing their best basketball at exactly the right time. Off the court, she's about to become the face of the biggest signature shoe launch in women's basketball history. The Nike Caitlyn 1 drops on October 1st, and the anticipation around it is unlike anything the WNBA sneaker world has ever seen. Her $28 million Nike deal has already produced a full apparel line, a signature logo that's become iconic, and a cultural presence that extends far beyond the basketball court. Contractually, she's locked in with the Fever through 2027, with the Epic provision opening the door for a long-term extension that could keep her in Indiana for the foreseeable future. Her teammate, Aaliyah Boston, just signed a record-breaking extension. The Fever's roster is the deepest it's been in years, and the new CBA means the financial landscape of the league has fundamentally shifted in a way that benefits players like Clark.
Her relationship with Stephanie White isn't broken. It's one of the strongest player-coach bonds in the league. Clark has publicly defended White multiple times this season, even going so far as to express anger at fans who booed White inside Gamebridge Fieldhouse. White has repeatedly praised Clark's competitiveness, her coachability, and her generational talent. The two share the same fire, the same stubbornness, and the same relentless desire to win. That's not dysfunction. That's the foundation of a championship-caliber partnership. And here's the part that makes all of this even more remarkable. Clark is only 24. She's in her 3rd professional season. She's already broken records that stood for decades. She's already changed the economics of women's basketball. She's already inspired an entire generation of young players who want to be the next Caitlyn Clark, and she's just getting started. The 2025 season tried to break her. Injuries stole almost everything from her. She watched from the sidelines while her team fought without her. She dealt with the mental battle of rehabilitation, the frustration of not being able to compete, the pain of watching opportunities pass by. But instead of letting that experience define her, she used it as fuel. She came back stronger, faster, and more determined than anyone could have predicted. And now she's playing the best basketball of her life at the exact moment when the spotlight on women's basketball has never been brighter. So the next time you see a thumbnail showing Caitlyn Clark in a Liberty jersey or a headline screaming about how she's leaving Indiana, remember what the actual evidence says. Remember the record-breaking performances. Remember the contract situation. Remember the words she's spoken directly into cameras, defending her coach, supporting her teammates, and committing to the franchise that drafted her first overall. The real story isn't about drama. It's about dominance. And the most dominant player in the WNBA is just getting warmed up. Now we want to hear from you. What do you think Caitlyn Clark's ceiling is? Are the Fever legitimate championship contenders this year, or do they need one more piece to get over the hump? And what impact do you think the Caitlyn 1 launch will have on the sneaker market? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and some of the best conversations on this channel come directly from viewers like you who bring unique perspectives to the table. If you got something out of this video, hit that like button. It seems small, but it makes a massive difference in helping more basketball fans find this content. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on all notifications so you never miss an upload. We're covering the biggest stories in women's basketball every single week, and the best is still ahead. Share this video with someone who needs to hear the real story, not the clickbait version. We'll see you in the next one.